This is a judicial tyranny. A lower court judge ruled just last week that Trump did have the authority to conduct these tariff negotiations. Then his decision got bumped to a South Florida court, which then bumped it to a New York-based three-panel international trade court, which I don't really think has the authority to do what they did yesterday. It is yet another example of judicial tyranny and a completely politicized judiciary, dead set on ignoring the results of the last of the election and the mandate that Donald Trump has been given. Frankly, his trade negotiations are going extremely well because he's appointed brilliant negotiators like Steve Witkoff, like Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent, like our ambassador to Turkey and now Syria, Tom Barrack. These are enormously capable individuals, but they basically, just as they tried to use the courts to stop the president from deporting dangerous, illegal gang members, now they're trying to stop him from writing our trade deals.
This is savage economic war. The Federal Reserve, as you know, is private. The shareholders are mainly in Europe. So the EU and its central bank, they got interest rate cuts. Everybody else is doing interest rate cuts. China is in this trade war. This is the private Federal Reserve directly lined up with the ratings agencies and others, with BlackRock, against Trump and the American people, literally trying to deep six us and have us go into debt default because they know Trump's plan is winning, and they get more and more desperate. This is freaking outrageous and makes my blood boil. Folks, they want us to collapse in the Great Reset, to build on our ashes their tyrannical system. They want us poor to dictate the terms of our surrender. This is war, Roger. People need to understand this is important.
Alex, you got to quit mincing words and say how you really feel. Look, you're absolutely right. There's a couple of things here. First of all, these ratings, that's completely bullshit. They're based on nothingness. It's a psyop trying to convince people that we're not doing well when we're doing better than we've ever done before. We've taken in $255 billion in new revenues from these tariff negotiations so far.
And now the judge is saying, give it back.
The Moody's and the rest of that, none of that should be paid any attention to. Yeah, look, I think we now know that Joe Biden was a virtual vegetable when he was president. A rutabaga, maybe a cabbage, I'm not sure. But he was in diapers. He was not in his right mind. He was non-compos mentis. This kind of reminds me of when Woodrow Wilson had a debilitating stroke in the last 3 years of his presidency. He was both mentally and physically debilitated. His wife, Edith Galt Wilson, would actually put the pen in his hand and then move the pen across official documents. Here, they did something even far more insidious. I called this on your show, Alex. Ron Klain, the former chief of staff for Biden, ran this initially, but Neera Tanden, Steve Nelson, these are among those who actually operated the auto pen. And it's not just the pardons, the preemptive pardons for Biden's political cronies like Adam Schiff and Dr. Anthony Fauci and General Mark Milley and Liz Cheney, all of whom need pardons because they engaged in treason.
Fauci.
But what's even worse is the hardened criminals, Alex, the drug dealers, the murderers, the drug traffickers, the sex traffickers, people who never applied for a pardon, people who never expressed any remorse. Why were they pardoned at the last minute by Joe Biden? This has no rhyme or reason other than if somebody got paid for those pardons.
Roger, what's really going on here? And do you think, as Senator Scott is saying, the bill is doomed? And then what does that do?
Well, I think Senator Scott, who's, of course, my senator, is signaling the White House that he wants to see deeper spending cuts. They don't have to be in the big, beautiful bill. In fact, Stephen Miller's absolutely right. Structurally, that's not the right place for them. There's so much good in this bill. It is the largest tax cut in American history. It is a continuation of the tax cuts passed in Trump's first term. If the tax cut is not renewed in January, Trump is right to have a 65% increase in federal taxes across the board. Also in there, doing away with the tax on tips, doing away with the tax on Social Security, doing away with the tax on retirement, tax credit for buying an American-made vehicle, car, or truck, increasing the child tax credit. These are all very important things. Economic growth is an important part of the Trump economic plan. On the other hand, Elon is also correct. I have a sentimental attachment to the old Republican Party, the party of Lincoln and the party of Roosevelt, the party Theodore Roosevelt, the party of Goldwater, the party of Reagan, and the party of Nixon, of course, the party of Trump. However, the gutlessness of some Republicans when it comes to actually cutting spending, as opposed to just talking about it, is really disheartening. Elon Musk, at great cost to himself, has shown us the way. He's identified trillions in waste, fraud, and corruption. But the way to do this is in rescission bills. The first one is going up. It's $9.4 billion rescission in federal spending. That sounds like a lot, but it's only about 5% of what Elon Musk and his Doge operation have uncovered. So it's what I call a good beginning. But if we don't get serious about cutting spending, and particularly if we don't cut the USAID political spending, where they're spending our tax dollars to promote revolution in other countries and war across the globe, as well as unrest in this country, well, then we're on a suicide mission. Republicans need to wake up and get serious about spending cuts. We're serious about tax cuts. We have to get serious about spending cuts.
And that leads me to the big issue with the economy that's front and center. For folks that don't know, most of you do, the U.S. has a huge debt. The Federal Reserve will not cut interest rates. That makes it even harder to service. Now, compared to China and the EU, we are the good house, in a bad neighborhood. We're the best house. That's a fact. We still hold all the cards. But you have Moody's and the rating agencies, everything they're doing, trying to crash confidence. Doesn't matter how many trillions Trump gets invested in the U.S. It's 10 plus trillion pledged, 3 trillion already here. Doesn't matter. All the right things he's doing, they just continue to try to crash things. And that's really the problem that we're dealing with. And now we have the Drudge Report, which is the Democratic Party mouthpiece. Federal Trade Court blocks King's tariffs, no authority illegal. Well, you can go into the Constitution, you can go into the law, you can go into the Judiciary Act of 1801, 1802. These Article 3s have no authority over the executive branch on large policies. It's only on individual issues or class actions. These judges cannot act alone. They're the ones trying to put the crown on, not President Trump, like in this image that the Drudge Report has. So this is just, sophomoric, low-level brainwashing. Federal court blocks Trump from imposing sweeping tariffs under emergency powers. Trade court strikes down Trump's global tariffs, basically agrees with the World Trade Organization. Court strikes down most of Trump's tariffs, ruling them illegal. And it's just outrageous that they have done this. And I would expect to very soon see the higher courts of the Supreme Court shoot that down. You got them asking Trump yesterday, are you a chicken? Because you went down from 150% tariffs to 30. That's what he originally said on China. China then agreed to 30%. They have 10%. That's what he said on the big day of liberation that he announced. So they don't understand. I mean, they understand. They're trying to deceive people that it wasn't part of art of the deal. But you look at this United States Court of International Trade. It's another Article 3 court that does not have this authority. It's supposed to be over individual trade disputes that are brought to it. And so, again, absolute, total power grab. And we have the Constitution, the law. Most of these judges were put in by Barack Obama and by Bill Clinton. I've got a list of them right here. You have the Judiciary Act of Thomas Jefferson. That's still law. The Supreme Court more than 20 times has ruled the presidents have this power over and over again. And so this is a big deal. And then, of course, the elephant in the room, U.S. Housing Finance Chief tells Powell to lower interest rates, but Powell refuses and says Trump can't fire him, which is true, but Congress can repeal the Federal Reserve Act. Roger, that's a lot to unpack, but what's your expert breakdown on this?
Let me dive right into it. This is a judicial tyranny. A lower court judge ruled just last week that Trump did have the authority to conduct these tariff negotiations. Then his decision got bumped to a South Florida court, which then bumped it to a New York-based three-panel international trade court, which I don't really think has the authority to do what they did yesterday. It is yet another example of judicial tyranny and a completely politicized judiciary, dead set on ignoring the results of the last of the election and the mandate that Donald Trump has been given. Frankly, his trade negotiations are going extremely well because he's appointed brilliant negotiators like Steve Witkoff, like Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent, like our ambassador to Turkey and now Syria, Tom Barrack. These are enormously capable individuals, but they basically, just as they tried to use the courts to stop the president from deporting dangerous illegal gang members, now they're trying to stop him from writing our trade deals. You will remember, Alex, immediately after the president's announcement of Liberation Day, that he posted a chart that showed that in virtually every single case, our trading partners are putting a higher tariff on us than we are putting on them. That's the starting point for these negotiations. I expect this to go to the Supreme Court, and I'm hopeful that the Supreme Court will rule as they have always ruled before on this question, and that they don't rule differently just because it's Donald Trump and not an establishment figure. And then you go to the question of cutting rates. The FHFA, the Federal Housing Finance Agency head, Bill Pulte, is absolutely right. Jerome Powell needs to cut interest rates. Inflation is under control. There's no evidence that it's going to burn out of control. If you want to make housing affordable in this country again, if you want to make buying a car or a truck affordable again in this country, if you want this economy to boom, then the Fed needs to cut rates. Pulte is absolutely right. I've seen him say this in several different forums.
And Roger, but let's be 100% clear. I understand for people, interest rates and trade isn't sexy, but it really is the sexiest thing. Cutting energy costs now in just 100 and something days, gas on average is down over $1. Eggs have gone down by half. I mean, this is the real world policies working. And in reality, we've won the trade war so far, but have we won in the hearts and minds? And people should get very upset and very vocal about the courts and the Democrats and the globalists and the EU literally trying to block all of this. And these judges, this is savage economic war. The Federal Reserve, as you know, is private. The shareholders are mainly in Europe. So the EU and its central bank, they got interest rate cuts. Everybody else is doing interest rate cuts. China is in this trade war. This is the private Federal Reserve directly lined up with the ratings agencies and others, with BlackRock, against Trump and the American people, literally trying to deep six us and have us go into debt default because they know Trump's plan is winning, and they get more and more desperate. This is freaking outrageous and makes my blood boil. Folks, they want us to collapse in the Great Reset, to build on our ashes their tyrannical system. They want us poor to dictate the terms of our surrender. This is war, Roger. People need to understand this is important.
Alex, you got to quit mincing words and say how you really feel. Look, you're absolutely right. There's a couple of things here. First of all, these ratings, that's completely bullshit. They're based on nothingness. It's a psyop trying to convince people that we're not doing well when we're doing better than we've ever done before. We've taken in $255 billion in new revenues from these tariff negotiations so far.
And now the judge is saying, give it back.
The Moody's and the rest of that, none of that should be paid any attention to. Here's what the American people know. This is why the president's poll numbers are holding up extremely well. When you go to the gas pump, gas is lower. When you go to the grocery store, the price of eggs and food is lower. And our neighborhoods are getting safer. Crime is down 25% in the District of Columbia since Donald Trump's
Roger, homicides are down 60% in Denver.
But then secondarily, Alex, you raised an excellent point. Remember when Elon Doge says he wanted to go to Fort Knox and look at the gold? When he said he wanted to go to the Federal Reserve Office in New York and look at the gold? How come we haven't heard anything else about that? Where is the gold? Could somebody please look at the gold? The gold which is supposed to underpin our system, although that's not even true anymore, hasn't been seen since 1974, I believe. It's time for some American official to actually see our gold reserve to make sure that it's actually really still there.
It's incredible. I think Trump needs to get really aggressive with Jerome Powell, the private Federal Reserve. He's criticized him, called him stupid and things, and said he's trying to kill the economy. But I think Trump ought to call for repeal of the Federal Reserve Act and then actually do it in the midterm. It'll take some time, but he needs to rattle his saber and point directly at Powell and say, we know you've got foreign shareholders that are the majority owner. We know you at the New York Fed represent that. You, through your EU central bank, same group, cartel, you just gave them interest rate cuts, but not us. You are an enemy of America, because that's what this is.
Well, I think it's important to recognize something the president said in that tape you played of him is exactly true. Donald Trump is not the one who lacks the heart for the battle. Donald Trump is not the one who doesn't see the problems we face and who the enemy is. Our problem are the gutless, feckless, weak-kneed, lily-livered, white wine swilling, country club belonging, brie cheese eating, establishment Republicans in the House and the Senate who do not have the guts for the fight. I'd love to repeal the Federal Reserve Act, but you got to get 51 votes in both houses to do that, 51% of the vote. And that, unfortunately, even with these slim Republican majorities, that's exceedingly hard. Mike Johnson has a near impossible job, Alex. Half of his members don't want to do anything. They just want to get reelected and go home. They don't want to rock the boat. Oh, you have evidence of Joe Biden and his family stealing millions from foreign powers? Oh, no, we can't impeach him. We can't be bothered with that. And then on the other hand, you have fire breathers like Anna Paulina Luna and Tim Burchett and others who want to take down the corrupted system and want to fight for real reform. And poor Mike Johnson's got to get a majority for everything he does, which means if any two Republicans bag out on him, or like that guy Gabarino in New York, fall asleep during a crucial vote, then he can't get anything done. It's time for these Republicans to step up to the plate. But frankly, we're going to have to win a greater majority in 2026. We're going to need to elect more fire breathers, more America First Republicans, more true mavericks in order to get this done.
And let's talk about that before we go to break.
Lack of leadership. It's not lack of leadership by Donald Trump.
You're absolutely right. That's a fact. And that's why, depending on the numbers I've looked at, what the Democrats stole at least 5 Senate seats, maybe 12 House seats, keeping elections going for months after in places like California. We've got to see election reform. We've got to see his executive orders, if these states don't have voter ID, to pull federal funds from states now. California, others continuing the transgender, boys and girls sports, all that has to end. It's time for Trump to really start actually pulling the federal funding out of these states.
There's no question about it. One of the maxims in my book, Stone's Rules, which has an introduction by our good friend Tucker Carlson, is use power or lose power. American people have empowered Donald Trump. He has to use that power. He's doing it, but he needs to do it more. He's put out an executive order on elections, but now he needs to use his financial might to enforce it with the states. You're absolutely right. I think they stole at least 3, probably 5 U.S. Senate seats in the last election. Here in my home state of Florida, I think it's the 14th district, we're told that Kathy Castor, a Democrat, beat former Navy Commander Rocky Rockford. 53,000 mail-in votes, Alex, but when you go look at the applications for those voters, they have no Social Security numbers and no dates of birth. They should not have been counted. The House Administration Committee of the U.S. House of Representatives, controlled by Republicans, is the final arbiter of who won that election. They should seat Rockford and unseat Castor. In Orange County, California, the folks over at Gateway Pundit have done a great job on this, exposing the fact that in at least 3 House seats, more people voted than are registered to vote. Again, the House Administration Committee needs to unseat those Democrats and seat the Republicans who actually won. If we do not impose election integrity, then we will have the result that we had in the last, not the last presidential election, but the one before that, which there was, I'm sorry, massive fraud.
All right, stay there, Roger. I want to come back and look at the overall Trump administration, who you think's doing the best job, who you're concerned about, how Trump's doing overall. And then I want to play some clips, and went obviously viral. People want to hear what we have to say about Kash Patel and Dan Bongino saying, oh, no, Epstein really did kill himself. And, oh, no, one person acted alone in Butler. Now they've made new comments. The president's responded saying, yeah, he's not buying it. Wow. So that clip's coming up with Roger Stone and a lot more. There's also a press conference on the tariff ruling by the court. Stay with us.
Here's Alex Jones, who has the largest audience in the country, bigger than any of the networks, the biggest megaphone in the country.
Alex Jones is the most extraordinary person I've ever met.
Well, some powerful statements by the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt in an ongoing press conference. We backed up at the start when Roger leaves us. I'm going to play a few minutes of that. And then in the third hour, we've just got so much incredible news and updates and breaking news we're going to be getting to on so many topics, so many fronts. Then the fourth hour, William F. Jasper, the globalist expert, editor of the New American Magazine, on what the globalists are planning, what they got up their sleeves, new pandemics are cooking up, new globalist treaties, and how the EU is trying to censor America. We got Marco Rubio and the vice president going after him now with sanctions and tariff actions and even sanctions against individuals if they continue. This is really good news because this is globalism with their long arm reaching in here. But I wanted to talk to Roger Stone of StoneZone.com, best-selling author and obviously confidant of the president, about the auto pin. You were the first person warning they were going to steal the election in 2020 and saying their plan is Biden's so sick and frail to basically force him out or have him die, so they have the gimmick of the first woman president to try to steamroll. That failed because he refused to leave, and the real president we know was Jill. But there was a committee, you said, that was going to run things run by Obama, which literally they have whistleblowers, high level, with Ed Martin. It's all the others are coming out on TV admitting it all now. But they're trying to limit it over to, it was some low-level people giving some pardons. Well, that was part of it, but it was the larger committee deciding executive orders, what bills to sign, all of it. President Trump goes there, says whoever used Biden's auto pin usurped the power of the presidency. Yeah, it's a coup. Meanwhile, they're trying to spin it all over the corporate media. Trump shows signs of cognitive decline, says speech expert. Well, sometimes he works too hard, but overall he's sharper than ever. And then you've got, again, the latest on Ed Martin and the fact they do have these high-level whistleblowers. You got Glenn Beck breaking it all down. I mean, this is a big deal. We learned Elizabeth Warren's been involved, Pocahontas, with the auto pin. It's just amazing that this is all going on. What do you think the right move should be here? I know Ed Martin with his anti-corruption, anti-government weaponization task force is moving in a very fast area. He's also the new head lawyer over the pardon department, so he can investigate that. We all know he means business. He's getting his staff together with the $1 billion he was just given. He's moving as fast as he can after his U.S. attorney position was blocked by Senator Tillis. And I think Trump wisely just moved on from that and gave Martin even more power. But what is your view on this? And what inside baseball do you have about where this is going? Because for me, this is really the big cut and dry issue, just going further than just them stealing the election in 2020, but just then having this secretive Politburo, as they called it themselves, running things. I mean, this needs to be hammered.
Yeah, look, I think we now know that Joe Biden was a virtual vegetable when he was president. A rutabaga, maybe a cabbage, I'm not sure. But he was in diapers. He was not in his right mind. He was non-compos mentis. This kind of reminds me of when Woodrow Wilson had a debilitating stroke in the last 3 years of his presidency. He was both mentally and physically debilitated. His wife, Edith Galt Wilson, would actually put the pen in his hand and then move the pen across official documents. Here, they did something even far more insidious. I called this on your show, Alex. Ron Klain, the former chief of staff for Biden, ran this initially, but Neera Tanden, Steve Nelson, these are among those who actually operated the auto pen. And it's not just the pardons, the preemptive pardons for Biden's political cronies like Adam Schiff and Dr. Anthony Fauci and General Mark Milley and Liz Cheney, all of whom need pardons because they engaged in treason.
Fauci.
But what's even worse is the hardened criminals, Alex, the drug dealers, the murderers, the drug traffickers, the sex traffickers, people who never applied for a pardon, people who never expressed any remorse. Why were they pardoned at the last minute by Joe Biden? This has no rhyme or reason other than if somebody got paid for those pardons. The good news is that Eagle Ed Martin is on this. The investigators, the FBI, are on this. They're going to go back and look at that time the cocaine was found at the White House. They told us, there was nothing to be seen there. They go back and reinvestigate
and Comey's
that.
all over the news, scared of the cocaine investigation. He's really upset.
Yeah, it's interesting. The only two things we know that Joe actually signed himself were his son's pardon. That's the one he promised us before the election he was not going to give, and his actual letter dropping out of the race. I had a former U.S. Senator, Democrat, tell me on the Friday before the Sunday that Biden would drop. He said he's going to drop Sunday. It won't be on White House stationery, and it'll actually be his real signature rather than an auto pen. And I said, are you sure about that? He said, absolutely, take it to the bank. He's out this Sunday. Then I saw Biden the very next day on TV saying there was no way he was dropping out. He was into the bitter end. I called my friend and I said, are you sticking by your prediction? He said, tomorrow around 4 o'clock, they will release a letter. Won't be on White House stationery. The signature will look strange. That's because it's really his, not an auto pen. Exactly what transpired.
Unbelievable. We're making a big deal about this. You're making a big deal about it, but other people, the president's doing it, but other people need to really point this out because this is, the Democrats have stuff like Jan 6 they still use that nobody buys and knows a fraud. And that brings me to this next. Patel says, answer to Major J6 question may surprise and shock. Well, we know it was feds doing fake arrests of other feds, Antifa inside, breaking out windows, helping them get in, dressing up like Trump supporters. We know the FBI director lied to Congress about that. What are you expecting to be coming out? I mean, they say it implicates the Democrats. Well, we know what they did. We were there. We experienced it. But this is, I can't wait to see this.
Well, first of all, I have an extremely high regard for Kash Patel. I strongly recommended him for that position, supported him for that position. I continue to have confidence in him. I'm a little baffled by his comments regarding Epstein, but let's come back to that. In this case, there's nobody that I trust more to investigate the ramifications of the Russian collusion hoax. Yesterday, we learned, for example, that Nellie Orr, who was working for Fusion GPS, but whose husband, Bruce Orr, was in the FBI, part of the entire Russian collusion hoax, lied to Congress about her knowledge. Now, since they tried to put me in prison for the rest of my life for lying to Congress when I made no willful or material misstatement to Congress, I'd like to see Nellie Orr and others like John Brennan, like James Comey, like Susan Rice, like Joe Biden, prosecuted for their involvement in the greatest single abuse of power in American history, the Russian collusion hoax, in which they used the full authority of the U.S. government and the incredible capabilities of our intelligence agencies, using two pieces of what they knew were completely fabricated evidence, the so-called Steele dossier, and the false claim that the Russians had hacked the DNC, for which there is no proof whatsoever. That is a figment of John Brennan's mind and nothing else.
And let me raise that since you mentioned it. Bongino says they're going to release more on that as well. And then we've already got this breaking FBI declassifies documents proving Fusion GPS lied to Congress and their witnesses did about contributions to Crossfire Hurricane. So now this giant tranche of documents has been released, just continuing to prove that was really a CIA Justice Department operation. We have the memos from John Brennan to Obama as well. Serious criminal activity. But speaking of that, Bongino's back on Fox after 2 weeks ago saying, oh no, Epstein killed himself. He says they're going to release the footage, not of him doing it, but that he was all alone, even though the cameras were turned off, and no one's buying this. And then he goes further and basically repeats in an interview yesterday on Fox, a 16-minute interview. We can't play the whole thing here, but it's posted on Infowars.com and on Real Alex Jones on X. We'll see the whole thing. And he says, we're just going where the facts are, and it looks like, Crooks acted alone. And it would take an hour to go over just the basic evidence that we've all covered of everything about Crooks and Pennsylvania, and then the other would-be assassin in Florida, government fingerprints, cover-ups of everything, a Secret Service stand-down. He's on the roof with a gun for 10 minutes. Everybody's pointing. Nobody goes and warns the president or the Secret Service up on the platform. And then Bongino, I've seen the file, as if the corrupt FBI handling all this is going to put in the file smoking guns about them. We know Bongino's not naive. We know Kash Patel's not naive. And some people say, well, they've really got an investigation going, and so that's why they don't want the bad guys to know. No, they don't. They've said they're closing it. Okay? They're going to release a report like the Warren Commission. This is ridiculous. And they've only been in there 100 and something days. I mean, I'm really concerned. And then Trump was in another interview and asked about it. He said, yeah, people really aren't buying this. I mean, so there's a major disconnect here. Here's part of that exchange with Bongino on Fox.
We've got a good tip this morning. We're going to run it out. We're not going to be able to make that public, obviously, right away, because we have to make sure, and we have to go all the proper steps. What I don't want to do ever, and I've said this before, it's not an excuse. I can't say to the public enough. I put it in my tweets all the time. I'm not asking you to trust me. Nothing drives me crazy when people go, they're asking us to trust the plan. I am absolutely not. Read my tweets. I don't want you to trust me. I don't. I'd be nice.
You'll have evidence.
All I care about is results.
So let's talk about what the president wants. He clearly wants a result. When he told Brett Baer on the assassination attempt, he's got questions on the first one. Watch.
There's a lot of frustration that we still don't know about that shooter in Butler. And we don't know about his communications. Will we get transparency?
I thought it was strange. The one guy had 18 cell phones. Okay. I have a lot of cell phones, but I have like 2. I call that a lot. And I think I probably make more calls than him. They live outside of Butler in a little place. Where do they get this lawyer that would represent IBM and would represent ExxonMobil?
But you're the president. Can't you find out?
No, Secret Service. They tell me it's fine. But it's a little hard to believe, to be honest with you, okay? It's a little bit hard to believe as I get that throbbing feeling.
So, Dan, the question is that a lot of people have wondered is, did this kid have help? He could not have pulled it off by himself. Was there a foreign actor? Did someone provide him with the weapons? Was there chatter online?
Well, let's be clear here. There are 2 separate parallel tracks here. Foreign actors targeting people in the United States. And it's not just the president, it's others. That is a very real track. The question is, do they intersect? The case file now, which, by the way, we are going to make another public release on this coming up. We're just kind of finishing up the product now to make sure it's tight and put together. You're going to see a lot of what you've heard about online does not exist in the case file. I'm not telling you information may not surface later. We do the PDB, the President's Daily Brief. We get the same brief, me and Cash, every morning. We have warned people out, telling them if there's something there we want to find. They have shaken every tree on this.
You mean you talked to his classmates, you talked to his family, you've talked to everyone, because they evidently they burned the body, cremated, and they cleaned the whole house out.
Yeah, and here's the thing. There are, like with the Epstein case, for example, we have a number of significantly odd abnormalities that would make a normal person go, huh? What? Mm-hmm. If Lawrence is near his bank at 4 o'clock and the bank gets robbed, but we know Lawrence reported to work afterwards and has an alibi, the fact that the bank was robbed, it's a fact that Lawrence was there, but it's not evidence that Lawrence committed the crime. Mm-hmm. Things, really, really bad things happened in this case. But when you see the report we're going to release, you'll see that not everything you've been told is true. But the president is not wrong at all. I mean, he's entirely, he was shot in the head. Yeah. He was shot in the head, got up and screaming, fight.
Let's just stop there. We don't need a report. We all saw it, and they did clean the house. And the parents are both literally in behavioral modification, mind control. It goes on and on and on. There was clearly a cover-up. The investigators that were sent, Hagman got threatened by the FBI in Pennsylvania. Roger, I know you got to go soon. I want to hit Real ID briefly, but just Bongino is just digging the hole deeper here trying to tell us, well, Epstein killed himself and all the rest of it, and he's seen the file, but more stuff may surface. What would get him and Cash to be behaving like this?
You know, Alex, it's perplexing because I have an enormous amount of confidence, particularly in Cash Patel. That Russian collusion document would never have been found but for Cash Patel, who knows that case inside and out. They hid those documents in a place where no one would ever find them. Only Cash Patel could do that. In this case, however, there are just too many anomalies, there are too many coincidences, there are too many open questions. Look, Alex, we're still fighting to get the truth about John F. Kennedy's assassination. President Donald Trump orders the bureaucracy to release everything, but we both know that there's an enormous amount that's still been held back that we still don't have. And that was over 50 years ago. Now, there are so many parallels. Why would they hose down the roof of the building from which the shooter shot? Unless they, of course, don't want us to test that for DNA. Just like they hosed out the back of JFK's limousine an hour after he was shot and killed. And we didn't even have DNA technology in those days. Too many anomalies, too many coincidences. Look, I like Dan Bongino. I have huge respect for Cash Patel, but they're going to have to give us something more than we've seen the file. Trust us. We're going to have to see. In the case of Epstein, in all fairness, there's always been a report that one of the security cameras was working, but the film was badly corrupted. Okay, that's fine. Show us that at least, but show us something. Because the New York City medical examiner, Michael Baden, perhaps the most respected pathologist in the country, said that he examined the body at the request of Epstein's family, and he's never seen, in the case of hanging, 3 broken neck bones, including the hyoid bone, which comes from strangulation, and that the markings on Epstein's body were not consistent with him hanging himself. Now you add to that the fact that the security cameras just happened to not be working, and the 2 people who were supposed to be monitoring him happened to fall asleep, and they happened to take him off suicide watch, and they happened to take his cellmate out of the cell. But 2 days before he murdered himself, he retained a new lawyer, David Schoen, one of the most eminent criminal defense lawyers in the country. Boy, he needed it. And he agreed to pay him a substantial retainer and wired him a down payment on that retainer. Does that sound to you like a man who is planning to kill himself?
And he was telling people on the phone, press and family, that he was going to be getting out soon, looking like he was about to blow the whistle. Roger, I want to get you back in the next few days, so just do 30 minutes on Real ID, because this is something we need to stop. We've got the presidents here. We need to get the facts up, but you've got to go. Also, I want to talk about, you know Trump well. I could see him. He's sharper, skinnier, healthier than ever. I do hear him doing late night interviews. Sometimes sounds really tired. We know he works too hard. But this attempt to act like he's Joe Biden, I want to do that. Tell the producers when you want to come on the next few days, and you're on StoneZone.com. Find everything Roger Stone there, his shows, all the great work he does, his books, and more. Roger Stone didn't just do nothing wrong. Roger Stone is an American hero. Roger Stone, thank you.